at the International Children's Center Artek and the State Kremlin Palace. And these trees can be seen everywhere in many places in the capital and in many other places, and I am grateful to the agencies that believed in this idea and the concept and who are helping along this process, and we are grateful for such results in this year. And now we are moving to our briefing, and traditionally to the issues of diplomacy, agenda of the foreign minister on 19-20 December. The Sergei Lavrov will take part in the second ministerial conference of the Russian-African Partnership Forum, which will be held in Cairo and will be the first event of this kind on African soil. The heads of the foreign ministries of Russia and African states, as well as the heads of executive bodies of the Continent's Integration Association, will exchange their opinions on the most pressing issues on the international and Russian-African agenda, with emphasis on the full implementation of the action plan of the Russian-African Partnership Forum for 2023-2026, approved at the second Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg in 2023. Particular attention will be paid to the development of relations in trade, economic and investment spheres, as well as the discussion of promising areas for further cooperation. The ministerial meeting in Cairo is the main event in Russian-African relations. This is the year and the key stage in preparation of the third Russian-African Summit scheduled for 2026. On the sidelines, Minister Lavrov will hold bilateral talks with a number of African colleagues, and we will inform you on the account on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs webpage on 23 under the presidency of the Minister Lavrov. The Commission on UNESCO will be hold the heads of federal subject representatives of the media, business and scientific cycles, and prominent figures in culture, education and sports will participate. As per tradition, the minister will assess the current state of cooperation between Russia and UNESCO. Several members of the Commission will also speak, discussing the plans for developing cooperation with the organization in the future. Following the meeting, an appropriate decision will be made. Now we move on to the current agenda. From ultimately, the announcement of the Russian Federation was published on the developments in Venezuela, and I'm going to note you. We follow the continuous and deliberate escalation of tensions surrounding friendly Venezuela. Of particular concern is the unilateral nature of decisions that pose a threat to international navigation. We count on the Trump administration, which is characterized by a rational and pragmatic approach, to avoid making a fatal error and to refrain from further sliding into a situation that threatens unpredictable consequences for the entire Western Hemisphere. We urge against succumbing to ideological tunnel vision, which narrows the perspective on current events. The words of the outstanding son of Latin America, Simón Bolívar, remain relevant. Quote, "Every nation has the right to choose its own rulers, and other nations must respect this choice." We consistently advocate for the normalization of dialogue between Washington and Caracas. We are convinced that steps are needed to de-escalate the situation and find solutions to existing problems and disagreements in a constructive manner with respect for international legal norms. Latin America and the Caribbean must remain a zone of peace, guaranteeing the stable and independent development of the region's countries. We reaffirm our solidarity with the Venezuelan people in the face of the difficulties they are enduring, as well as our support for the course of Nicolas Maduro's government aimed at defending national interests and the sovereignty of the motherland. Now we move on to Ukraine. The Kiev regime continued to commit acts of terrorism and crimes against civilians. Over the past week, Ukrainian artillery shelling and drone strikes on the regions hurting 83 civilians. 14 were killed, 69 wounded, including 4 children. The last night, Rostov, Bataysk, and Taganrog were attacked by UAVs. Unfortunately, as a result of the attack, 3 more people were killed and 9 were injured. All of them I highlighted were civilians. Some facts of other crimes committed by Kiev regime. Belgorod region on December 13-14. At least 5 people were injured in attacks by enemy drones in populated areas of the region, among them a 5-year-old girl in Yekaterinovka after drone struck the house where she lives with other members of her large family, 13 people. A fire broke out. It was quickly extinguished. Fortunately, no one else was injured. On December 15, Ukrainian armed forces militants launched a rocket attack again on Belgorod, causing no casualties but damaging 6 apartment buildings and 1 private house. On December 15-16, Ukrainian UAVs attacked 3 cars in the village of Novostroyevka Pervaya and Glotovo, injuring 5 people. Bryansk region on December 14, drone strike in the village of Podivotye killed 1 civilian. Donetsk People Republic on December 14, 2 people were injured in an attack by armed forces of Ukraine in the village of Shevchenko, and on the same day a woman was injured in the village of Pisky. December 15 was a result of UAV strike on Dokuchayevsk and Krasnoarmeysk. 2 civilians were injured. Zaporozhye region on December 11 and 13, Ukrainian drones attacked 2 ambulances in Vasilyevka, Polokovsky municipal district. None of the medical personnel were injured. December 13, Ukrainian drones attacked municipal regions of Polovskaya, Kamensk, Dniprovsk, affecting 7 people, including a minor born in 2010. The drone strikes against Kamensk, Dniprovsk, and Pologovsk. A man was killed. An 11-year-old girl was seriously injured, and a woman was killed in a shelling on December 16. And bloody safari was organized by the armed forces of Ukraine. On December 13, Ukrainian Nazis organized the hunt against animals of the zoo. I understand that when we're speaking about such a hunt against people, adults and young children, what else can we mention? And this fact that they are interested in hurting and killing everything that is on their way. In Kursk, in the region of Sudzha-Belovsk, 2 people were affected. On December 14, the art school was affected in Svatovo. In Saratov region on December 13, 2 people were killed as a result of a massive drone attack on residential areas and civilian facilities. Damage was caused to apartment buildings, a clinic, and a kindergarten. Tver region on the night of December 12, while repelling an attack by enemy UAVs, one of the drones hit a residential apartment building, injuring 7 people, including a child. Kherson region on December 10, as a result of shelling by Ukrainian nationalists, 3 employees of the Aloshkinskaya district hospital were killed and 2 were injured. On December 11-12, 3 civilians were killed and 5 were wounded by UAV strike in the Golopristansky municipal district, the village of Radensk, Aloshki. 3 civilians were killed and 5 wounded. On December 15, Ukrainian forces strikes in the city of Kakhovka, Novaya Kakhovka. 1 person was killed and 2 wounded, while a kindergarten building was damaged in the village of Nizhny Saragozy. In Krasnodarsky Krai, 2 people were injured, and I will continue enumerating the facts, despite the fact that the operative information is received through various channels, through regional channels, through social services channels and medical establishments. But we will continue to inform international community about all these facts, about all the crimes, informing all the media representatives to avoid others saying that this never happened, because you know everything. We tell you all. We translate all the information into the languages of different countries. So saying later that these have never been mentioned is impossible. According to the information of the investigation committee, the damage to infrastructure reaches 600 billion rubles. As for the punishments, Russian law enforcement agencies continue to prosecute Ukrainian war criminals. Colombian and Brazilian mercenaries Mendes Sandoval Deiber Federico and Bencato Jr. Orley were sentenced to 13 years in prison. Both have been placed on international wanted list for the terrorist attack carried out on July 8 this year using UAV on a beach in Kursk, which claimed the lives of 4 people, including a 5-year-old child. The commanders of the 2nd and 3rd battalions of the 14th Separate Regiment on Unmanned Systems of Armed Forces of Ukraine, Nikita Zelenko and Dmitry Kolyada, were sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment. Igor Skubak, Ukrainian militant who shot 2 Russian prisoners of war on June 10 this year in Sinitsa forest plantation between Otradne and Komar in Donetsk People Republic, was sentenced to life imprisonment. His accomplice, Commander Nikolai Kriklevenko, who gave the illegal order to kill them, was previously sentenced in absentia to 24 years in prison and placed on international wanted list for shelling civilian buildings in Mariupol and its suburbs in March 2022, including a school building, which resulted in death and injury of civilians, including the killing of a minor. Long prison terms were handed down to 5 captured militants from the Ukrainian Armed Forces Artillery Brigade. Commander Dmitry Struzhavsky and his subordinates Dmitry Leontiev both received 23 years and 9 months. Nikita Korobitsyn and Vitaly Bochkov, 23 years and 4 months each, and Alexander Dolinyak, 23 years and 2 months. Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander Vitaly Nashubsky has been sentenced in absentia to 19 years in prison for ordering Ukrainian militants to shell populated areas in the Belgorod region from February to March 2023, killing 1 person and injuring 5 others. The war criminal has been placed on international wanted list. Sergei Mishenko, commander of the mortar battery of the 36th Separate Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, received a 22-year prison sentence for leading repeated shelling of residential buildings and civilian infrastructure in DPR settlements in February-April 2022, which resulted in the injury of a civilian and damage to residential buildings and structures. And now on Zelensky staged action in Kupansk on December 12, Zelensky once again showed how he likes to prolong hostilities at the expense of Ukrainian lives. This time he showed off at the style of the entrance to Kupansk. I remind you, Kupansk was liberated on November 20 by Russian troops. What did Zelensky state? Today it is extremely important to achieve results on the front lines so that, according to Zelensky, Ukraine can achieve results in diplomacy, end of quote. For the sake of spectacular video footage demonstrating some military successes we put it in brackets, of the armed forces of Ukraine, the leader of the Kiev regime has thrown more reserves into a senseless battle in the Kupansk region, in the Kupansk direction in recent years. Kiev's attempts to make a breakthrough, which were doomed to failure from the outset, were repelled, and the enemy suffered heavy losses in equipment and manpower. Why? Just for the sake of this criminal vanity. Against this backdrop, on December 15, Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs Andrei Sybiga hasn't announced at a meeting of the EU Council of Foreign Ministers in Brussels that the military operation in Kupiansk had been successful, accusing Russia of lying. Russia was not lying, but because facts are stubborn things. Kiev cannot bring itself to acknowledge the deteriorating situation on the ground. Liberated Kupiansk was and remains under the control of the Russian armed forces. It is noteworthy that there are, through these maneuvers in the information media, they are trying to achieve their goals. Now photos online are circulating of two female soldiers, and the fact is that it is complicated to make any photos there because the place is under control of our armed forces. Such circumstances confirm that this was yet another staged event by Bankova Street to pull the wool over the eyes of its sponsors and confuse wishful thinking with reality. Same was in Krasnoarmeysk, with all the photos and stories in the information space. Just the same story was in Chasov Yar. You do remember that everything that happened was exactly the same. You can just put it down. When Zelensky is taking pictures with stelae or monuments on his backdrop with the names of the settlements, the armed forces of Ukraine should know that these places will be taken over by the Russian forces. I can't but mention that the stelae in Kupiansk, where Zelensky made his selfie, is in 1.5 kilometers to the cemetery, which makes him closer to the cemetery than to Kupiansk. And now on the sponsors of all this, on December 16 of this year, the 32nd meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group took place online. 15 of its more than 50 participants announced plans for military aid to Kiev in 2026. The leaders are Germany, still, in addition to the 2 new Patriot SAM systems and the 9th IRIS-T system, air defense system. It is ready to allocate another 11 billion euros for the purchase of air defense systems, UAVs, and artillery ammunition. And Norway tries not to lag behind Berlin, starting its intention to spend $7 billion for these purposes. And Britain made a modest showing. Obviously, the deficit of available funds is having an effect. This time, London limited itself to the sum of £1,600 million sterling, funded by frozen Russian assets and budget allocations. The Netherlands plans to spend 700 million euros to the purchase of UAVs. The Denmark plans to spend 250 million euros on enhancing Ukraine's aviation capabilities. The Baltic countries, as if on command, reported a contribution of 0.25% of the GDP to support Kiev, including financing the NATO initiative to meet the priority needs of the armed forces of Ukraine by purchasing American weapons. Isn't it funny? So it's a degradation on the side. They intend to shell out almost 500 million euros All this clearly illustrates the West's lack of desire to achieve peace in Ukraine. You remember, like several months ago, they were saying that they needed peace. It was a requirement. Everybody needs peace. We spent many years to have political and diplomatic truce, but we know who didn't allow this to happen. Those who take the last thing from their pockets or from somebody else's pockets just to sponsor attacks. And another interesting thing on the background of the ideas of Euro hoax, so to say, the ideas of illegally diverting funds blocked by the Europeans. Attention was drawn to media reports about the Ukraine police uncovering a network of fraudulent offices in Kiev, Dnipro, in Ivano-Frankovsk, which deceitfully stole from nearly 50 citizens of the Czech Republic, Latvia, and Lithuania more than 1 million euros. The paradox is that the corrupt regime of Zelensky, openly encouraging the activities of such call centers, essentially closes its eyes to the fact that they are stealing money from those who are trying to steal it for Kiev itself. This is the ugly circle of bloody money in the West. The illicit facts confirm the urgency of tasks related to denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats emanating from its territory. All of these goals will certainly be achieved, as the Russian Federation said. Now we turn to other relevant issues. There were a lot requests from journalists to comment the presidential elections in Chile. We welcome the will of the Chilean people in the presidential elections held in the Republic of Chile on December 14th resulted in the election of the leader of the Republican Party, José Antonio Cast, as the new president of the country. We are impressed by the president-elect's stated commitment to base his state policy on common sense, pragmatism, and a move away from ideological blinders in the interests for the benefit of all Chilean cities. For decades, the Russian Federation and the Republic of Chile have been united by bonds of friendship, solidarity, and cooperation that have marked the bright pages of our shared history. Russia remains committed to maintaining a constructive dialogue with Chile based on equal and mutual respect, consideration of national interests, and commitment to the traditional values inherent to our peoples. We have much to offer Chile. Based on our experience developing our vast territories, we offer numerous opportunities for infrastructure construction, primarily in energy, transport, and communications. These include achievements in digitalization, education, pharmaceuticals. They also, of course, ensure law and order and public safety, for which Russian cities rank among the world's leaders. Our doors are open for cooperation in these and many other areas. Sri Lanka, in the end of November of this year, Sri Lanka was struck by a powerful and devastating cyclone, according to reports. The Sri Lanka side, the floods and landslides resulted in 643 deaths and 180 people missing, while transportation links between regions of the island nation were disrupted. The damage caused by the cyclone exceeded $7 billion. President of the Russian Federation on December 1st sent condolences to the President of Sri Lanka regarding the numerous casualties and destruction, wishing a speedy recovery to all those affected. Following Putin's instructions, with the active assistance of the Russian Foreign Ministry and our embassy in Colombo, a special Russian emergency ministry flight arrived in Colombo on December 10, carrying 35 tons of humanitarian aid, including mobile power stations, pumping equipment, multi-place tents, and food supplies. The handover ceremony of the humanitarian cargo in Colombo was attended by Sri Lanka's Minister of Ports and Civil Aviation, Deputy Minister of Defense, during a phone conversation with Russian ambassador to Colombo. Foreign Minister asked to convey deep gratitude to Russia's leadership for the provided humanitarian assistance and emphasized that this noble gesture is a vivid confirmation of the traditionally friendly relations between the two countries. We have a special section, anti-fake, where we publish every day or every week reviews of the fake news, where we digest the articles that we unveil as fraudulent. And some of them will be read during the briefing. The number of materials published in France of some media, there are a lot of them. TV5, Monde, RFI, they deliberately distort Russia's role in the fight against terrorism in Sahel, and it does not give other options other than show the campaign designed to devalue our country's contribution to ensuring regional security and to undermine its strengthening position in the Sahara-Sahel region. However, instead of engaging in the pathological spreading of lies, French journalists and pseudo-analysts would do well to reflect on the true causes of the large-scale regional security crisis. And these causes, as the saying goes, lie on the surface. Primarily, this is the operation organized by France to overthrow the legitimate government of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya in 2011. And the tragic events that unfolded thereafter, which ricocheted against all states and peoples of the region. Precisely these actions became the starting point for the spread of Islamist ideology in the Sahel, the emergence of terrorist groups, and the uncontrolled growth of violence and arms trafficking. By thoughtlessly pulling the trigger, Paris did not think about the future of the region. It is also worth reminding the French of the failure of their own attempts to fix the security situation in the Sahel. You remember, right, from 2014 to 2022, Operation Barkhane was active in the region, ostensibly intended to conduct counter-terrorism activities. However, over time, French troops deployed in the region began to be increasingly associated by the local population with colonial-era occupation forces. The failure of Operation Barkhane led to a radical reduction of France's military presence in Africa. But that is not all. Periodically, information appears in foreign media that it is French intelligence services that are providing support to terrorist groups in the Sahara-Sahel region in order to destabilize the nationally oriented governments of Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, which managed to rid themselves of French paternalism. Well, as we say, these are materials in the media, but there is no smoke without fire. In its relations with regional countries, Paris has turned out to be a hostage to a political economic system based on neo-colonial approaches similar to those of the 19th century. Today, when African countries have a real opportunity to choose foreign policy partners, such approaches no longer work, and the states of the region are increasingly making their choice in favor of mutually beneficial and promising projects with other countries. Such is the objective reality that the French state is not ready to accept today, encouraging various kinds of disinformation and trying to shift its responsibility for regional security problems onto others. And as for Russia's role in ensuring the stability of the Sahara-Sahel region, let me recall by the beginning of December 2025, largely thanks to the involvement of the African Corps of the Russian Ministry of Defense, Malian authorities managed to overcome the acute phase of the fuel crisis. At the moment, the armed forces of Mali, with the support of military specialists from the Africa Corps, are conducting counter-terrorism operations in areas where bandit formations are rampaging. The Russian Federation is interested in developing a multifaceted, mutual beneficial cooperation with the Confederation of Sahel States. We intend to continue making a constructive contribution to strengthening the regional security architecture, both on a bilateral basis and through relevant UN mechanisms. On political manipulation, we noted that at the end of November, the Commission of the United States on International Protection of Religious Freedoms published a report devoted to, as they say, restrictions on religious freedom in a number of Latin American states, whose governments Washington considers hostile. Nobody knows why. We hope that instead of tilting at windmills, American lawmakers will pay due attention to a country where real systematic persecution against the church and believers has been taking place for many years, a place where reprisals against clergy and parishioners occur with the silent consent of the West. At the Western money, we are speaking about Ukraine. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation speaks about this constantly, including during our weekly briefings. Numerous documented facts regarding the persecution and crimes against the clergy, believers and parishioners of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church have been collected in a special report by the Russian Foreign Ministry, the latest version of which was published on January 29 of this year. And this work to recollect the data will be continued. Our calls to react to the crimes of the Kiev regime against the canonical Orthodox Church in Ukraine remain, in most cases, unanswered by official Western structures. By failing to condemn the actions of the Ukrainian neo-Nazis, the West essentially covers up their crimes. It is particularly motivates them to continue their work. It is cynical that for the sake of political expediency, Western representatives constantly express concern over the rights of the LGBT population of all sorts and all groups and minorities, but except believers. Double standards are practiced on the external track. Priority attention is hypocritically given to multilateral efforts in the field of human rights protection in countries that are not satellites of the West. At the same time, as we have emphasized in relevant Russian Foreign Ministry reports on human rights, the situation in this sphere within the so-called Western democratic states themselves is simply catastrophic. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation will continue to draw the attention of the international community and all concerned individuals to the oppression of believers in Ukraine and other countries. We know that such people exist in the West as well. Baltic countries, the police regimes ruling Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia are intensifying regressive methods to eradicate all dissent. At the core of the judicial arbitrariness prevailing in the Baltic lies the same primitive Russophobia, hatred of the Russian language, history, and culture. The machine of punitive justice is operating at full capacity. In Latvia, trumped-up criminal cases have been initiated against 14 Latvian journalists for collaborating with, as it was said, Russian media outlets and justifying Russian aggression and inciting hatred toward Latvians and Ukrainians. Can you imagine these sentences? Some verdicts have already been handed down, resulting in massive fines or prison sentences. Many repressed, such as old ones. I have to use this word. We need to understand what the regime is fighting with, so to say, tolerant and caring about human rights and the elderly person who requires attention, Alexander Gaponenko, or, for example, a person with serious health issues, Svetlana Nikolaeva. Their rights are rudely violated, and there are people who died while being in prison. Babur is also in jail for fake allegations.